Hello, everybody. It's good to see you again, which I can not see you, but you can see me. And I'm glad that you're joining us for another night on the study of the fruit of the Spirit. And tonight I have with me Ben Hayes, and I'm glad that Ben is with us. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Jerry, and hello, world out there. Good to join you.
It's a crazy world right now, isn't it?
Man, it's incredible. Nothing like we were just talking about a little bit ago. Nothing like I've ever seen before, and probably you either.
And you're a young guy.
That's right. And I think it's like nobody else has seen before either, because the last thing that was anything like this was 1917, 1918, somewhere in there. And,
About a year or two
none of
before I
us
was
were
born.
around then. Even you weren't around then.
A year or two before I was born. I would have one member of my youth group would tell me, Mr. Jerry, you found the cure for that.
That's probably true.
That's the way it goes. Well, Ben, I am glad that you're joining with us this evening or this time. We're actually recording this in an afternoon, just to let people know when to do it. When I started thinking about the fruit of the Spirit, and I sent this out to several youth minister friends about doing this, I kind of gave you your choice of what you'd like to talk about. And I am so glad that you are going to be talking about the word peace. And we've already looked at love and joy, and now then we're going to be looking at this word peace. And I know the Bible is full of it, and I'm excited to hear what you have to say about it, especially at this time in our life of things going on. So, Ben, tell me a little bit about the fruit of the Spirit and peace.
Well, the first passage that comes up that I really think about, it's where we're going to spend our time. So if you want to turn over to Philippians chapter 4, I think a lot of people's minds probably go there. Philippians chapter 4 and verse 7 just says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." That passage means a lot to me. Some of you watching this will know this. Some people don't, but I think most people associate Travis and I with being kind of goofy and that sort of thing. And we do a little podcast now where we try to talk about our stories and interview some people who've had difficult times in their life. That's what the whole thing is about. So it's kind of the flip side of what we typically do and where people typically see us. But it's the Batify podcast, and I don't mean to,
You
throw
can
out
plug
a
it. Go ahead.
shameless plug.
You can do a
But
plug. It's okay.
the reason I bring up that is because it's been one of those blessings for us, because we've gotten to interview some people. Nathan Pirtle was just recently on and talked about his story. Karen Mann, we're going to have her on soon talking about some of her story. And Michael Whitworth is on there, is going to be on there soon. And so we've got several different people who talk about those things. But it's really started with, most of you know Travis's story. And then, back in 1999, it's been 20 years ago, which is unbelievable to me. I was a student at Freed Hardeman, and my girlfriend was killed in a car accident. And so when all that happened, obviously that kind of rocks your world. And it made me, during that time, I remember this passage coming up. At some point, somebody shared this passage. In fact, what I remember is I was flipping through the Bible one night and not looking for anything in particular. And this passage was the one I found. And so, not that I hadn't seen it before, but at that point I wasn't looking for it. It just happened to come across I think those are God things that happen sometimes. And that's how, he comforts us. And so as I was reading, I saw this, the peace of God that surpasses all comprehension will guard your hearts and your minds. And so when you ask about, talking about these topics, I couldn't help but think about that event and how even God's word, God's people, all the different things about being a Christian comforted me even in some really difficult times. And right now we find ourselves facing some stuff that, like we said earlier, nobody has really ever seen before. And we wonder, how are we going to get through this? What's going to happen? And a lot of people are anxious. A lot of people are nervous. A lot of people don't know what to think. And even, there's been some nights this week I've had a hard time going to sleep. Not necessarily because I'm worried about it. It's just, you just can't shut your mind off about it. It's just there, and it's something that you're, constantly wondering, what are they going to do next? How are people going to be helping people next? And so, that passage just sort of plopped down. We just kind of plopped that passage down, but we really need to look at what all's around it. So look at verse 4, if you want to go back in that. Verse 4 says, rejoice in the Lord. And what does that word say, Jerry? What's the next word? Rejoice in the world. Always.
Always.
And again, I say rejoice. It's not just about, when times are good. And most people will tell you, Paul wrote Philippians from a jail cell. He's not in the best of scenarios, and yet he's writing to them saying, why don't you guys rejoice always? And let your gentle spirit be known to all men. The Lord is near. Be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be known to God. And there's where it comes in. And the peace of God, which surpasses all comprehension, will guard your mind. So the first thing he talks about is prayer. If you want to have that peace that God has for us, then you need to turn yourself over to him in prayer. Is it sinful to be anxious and to be worried? Some people bring that up and go, well, it's a sin to be. Jesus said, don't worry. Here he says, don't be anxious. But if you remember Jesus in the garden, he was a little bit worried about what he was going to face the next day. But in his worries, where did he go?
He went straight to the Father.
He went to the Father. He wasn't sinning by worrying, but the right way to handle that worry and that anxiety is to go to the Father. And obviously he's given us some ways to handle that in our world today too. And he's given us the church and people around us and doctors and nurses and whatever to help us with those sorts of things. But the first place we ought to go is to him. And sometimes when we go to him, he's going to direct us. Somebody in our life is going to direct us to the right place if there's things that we just really can't manage and handle. So first thing he says is prayer. The next thing he says, and finally, brethren, verse 8, whatever is true and honorable and right, whatever is pure and whatever is lovely and whatever is of good repute, if there's anything excellent, if there's anything worthy of praise, then what? Think on these things. Dwell on these positive things. Right. We can dwell on the negatives all day long. We can dwell on the stuff that's going on around us and the numbers that are rising with the coronavirus, or even the death tolls that are rising with it around the world. Or we can start thinking about the people who are doing the really good stuff. Right. We can start focusing on the good parts of this and what people are doing in the name of God to touch people's lives, with teaching, with good stuff. There's people out there who are helping people all the time. You guys up in Tennessee know about that too. Before this thing ever broke, there was all sorts of damage and craziness with the tornadoes up there. And so, you guys are still going through, I don't know about you guys in Spring Hill, but I know just north of you guys, y'all are going through all sorts of stuff still with that. So there's a lot of things that are happening in our world, but then you see a lot of people doing good stuff. And he says, when you get surrounded by the bad, I think it was here recently, Tom Hanks did the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, or I can't remember what the name of it was, about Mr. Rogers. Yeah. And in that I remember Mr. Rogers always said, look for the helpers. There's always crazy things to look for, but look for the people who are helping out. And if you find those, you see the good in the bad situation. And before we leave this passage, you go to verse 10, and he says, but I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you have revived your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity. Not that I speak from want, for I've learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I know how to live in prosperity. In every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of abundance and suffering need. So he talks about, and I've used this a lot since last year, about this time I heard a lesson about battles and blessings. Mm-hmm. Everything in the Bible is about battles and blessings. It's about times where God's people were going through difficult struggles. There's not a single hero in the Bible that didn't go through a struggle. Isn't that what being a hero is about? That you went through struggles and you were able to go on the other end of those things and look back and say, hey, God brought me through it. Whether they live or whether they died acting in him. And so Paul says, I know how to go through the battles, and I know how to go through the blessings, both humble means and prosperity, both being filled and going hungry, abundance and suffering need. And it's in that context that he uses the phrase that we always go to. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Sometimes life's not fun.
Right.
Being cooped up in your house, not being able to hang out with your friends. And I know for some of you, you're going, I kind of like not having to go to school. But I think for some people, not getting to go to school and getting to go to work, especially going to work and make money, for those who aren't able to do that, that's one of those humble means. That's one of those, I may be going hungry a little bit, or I may be eating a whole lot more, ramen noodles or ramen noodles, or however you say them, more than I'm used to. But I know how to do those things, and I can do all those things through Christ who strengthens me. And I think that's a description, Philippians 4, of peace. I'm trusting in God. I'm talking to God. I'm focusing on the good things around me, and I'm learning how to be content. And you've probably heard, and probably most of the people that are watching have heard, the story of the king who wanted a painting of peace.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of my favorite little stories. I don't think it's true. I don't know. But, it's one of those things where he says, I want somebody in the kingdom to paint this great picture of peace. And we're going to have, a competition to see who wins it. And so all these people paint, these tranquil scenes of lakes and rivers and whatnot. And there's this one painting, and it's of this raging storm. And, at some point he chooses this painting, and they ask him, why did you choose the painting of a raging storm? It's on the ocean, it's of a bluff, and there's lightning and thunder. And, I don't guess you can see thunder in a painting, but there's lightning and rain and all those different things. And he points out that in the cleft of the rock, there's a bird, a mother bird with her little ones tucked under her wings.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that's a picture of peace. Peace is not that everything is going right. Peace is that you can find that comfort and you can find that strength even in the middle of a storm. And so right now is just another one of those storms. We've been facing storms since the dawn of creation, the dawn of mankind. But what we know is that even in the middle of the storms, that God is there with us. We can speak to him. We can talk to him. His word speaks to us. The people around us are doing things that are really showing us that love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And that he's going to help us be able to get along in the means, whatever it is that we're facing. So to me, Philippians 4 is all about peace.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate it. The when I have to think about one thing that just really stuck with me when you talk about Jesus going to the garden and he went back to the Father. What was the thing he said? If it be your will, let this cup pass from me. And then what was his answer? Nonetheless,
not my will, but yours be done.
Not my will.
Yeah.
And I think if we can all catch on to that, that's when I think we can also find some peace. I got a question I want to ask you, and I know that you do some counseling, and let's just say, for example, that we have some parents that have some littles that are really concerned about this right now. If you can just give me one little tidbit of maybe you've got 7,000 little ones yourself.
I do.
But what have you told? What's something you've told your kids about this time? Because they're telling their moms, Mom, why can't we go to church? Why can't I go to school? Mom, why can't we go out? I know we can go outside, but why can't I go play with my friends? Can you give me a little bit of, because this will provide some peace to the little ones.
Yeah, I think, for us, it's just, we've been honest with them about it. I think kids, obviously our 3-year-old doesn't really have a clue what's going on. Our 6-year-old and 9-year-old are probably the ones that are kind of caught in that middle point. The older ones understand it, realize social distancing, for the most part, and that sort of thing. But the other ones, we've just been honest with them. There's something that's making people sick, but we've not been doomsday with them either.
Sure.
I think you to let them see peace. You have to let them know that, hey, we understand that regardless, this is like a lot of the other sicknesses that we see. If we get it, we're going to take those proper precautions. We're going to do what we need to do. We've talked to them a lot about that, for the most part, it doesn't seem to be impacting kids as badly as it impacts some others. Now, there's been a few cases that do, but it's the same with the flu and other stuff. By the way, I'm not comparing the two things.
Sure.
I'm not trying to say that it's not bad, but just letting them know we're going to handle it the same way we handle if we get anything else. We're going to, we'll go to the doctor. We'll let them, take care of us if that's if we need to do that. But mostly it's just been, here's what's going on. Here's why we can't get out. And I think the more you can be honest with them and speak to them as truthfully as we do to each other, this is what's happening and this is what's going on. But also that, God's with us, God's taking care of us. And, we've just tried to encourage them to know that. So
appreciate that.
Probably what most parents are doing.
Exactly. And I know every family has to deal with it their own way too, but there are some ways to talk about this and talk to this. Communication is the biggest thing. It is talk to your children. Don't be so.
And I was going to say, let them talk to you.
Yeah.
Let them tell you what their fears are. 'Cause sometimes they're not. I haven't gotten the feeling that ours are terribly scared of anything right now. Maybe it's 'cause we've not, we've acted like it's a big deal. We haven't been out to eat in over a week. That's huge for us. They're all like, what is this?
You mean mom's having to cook?
Yeah, that's right. And dad, both of us. And, they're going, what in the world, because that's just not what we typically do. So their world's different.
Right.
But we let them, I think the biggest thing, anytime your kids are going through whatever, it may be the storms, it may be this coronavirus or whatever. I think when you don't allow them to express that they're scared or they're angry or they're whatever, then that's where, the trouble can start. Just let them talk. So not just, sometimes we want to talk and fill their minds with the right things. Sometimes they just need to empty their minds on us and have somebody to listen to them.
Thank you. Well, Ben, thank you a lot for joining me for this and doing this recording. And I appreciate you bringing a little bit of peace in our life today.
Yes, sir. I hope so.
Thank you a lot, and we appreciate it. And
Yes,
folks, join back in tomorrow night for another one. Thank you very much.